Shabbat Shalom. It is an honor to be able to share Shabbat with you. What a time. Laws that I do not understand. Shortages of water. A plague that strikes wide and deep. Leaders who ought to know better, who throw tantrums and in some way are being held to account. Longtime leaders who may be at the end of their tenure, and armies battling one another on so many fronts. So I ask you, my friends, did I describe the Torah portion or the world around us in 2022? Remarkable how much the events of our time mirror, in some cases, almost word for word, the events described by our ancestors thousands of years ago. It's something to ponder. And it's why we return to these stories, these lessons, again and again and again. As our Pirkei Avot also told us, turn it over and turn it over, for all is within it. But though Shabbat is our time, fortunately not our only time, to consider the words of our sages and our scripture, it is a time for oneg, and yet a time also, as with all of our holy gatherings, it's a time to remember. And so I'd like to take a little delight this morning, though it is bittersweet, and then conclude with a remembrance of someone that I do not imagine any of us knew personally, but will represent the kind of beautiful person who is no longer in our world, and we are the poorer for it. The character and personage of Miriam is an extraordinary one. She appears just a handful of times in the Torah, and she is described as a prophetess, Miriam HaNeviah. What her prophecies were, we really don't know. And the scant details of her life and contribution are so brief that we have no option but to resort to filling in the blanks as best we can. It is thought that she prophesied to her parents that they should continue having children, because who knew what a new member of the family might bring to the world. She, of course, is bold and confronts power, even from the reeds, as she meets Pharaoh's daughter, watching over her little brother to make sure that he can fulfill his destiny and the destiny of the Jewish people. She is a broker between Pharaoh's daughter and Miriam's mother, Yocheved, to provide Moses with the sustenance, the nourishment, the mother's milk that he needs. Later, of course, she leads the women by the water at the parting of the Sea of Reeds, when she sang out as well, and from which we get our indelible image of Miriam's tambourine. Miriam dancing with the women. Depending on how you read the story, she either stands up for Moses's wife, calling out Moses's questionable behavior, potentially having neglected his wife, such that Miriam speaks out against Moses's marital situation. It's a murky scene, to put it mildly. She is stricken with a scaly affliction, but it is thought that certainly she is forgiven because of the way that Moses prays for her and the fact that the Israelites don't march on without her until she is recovered. Miracle we can march on together today with so many not feeling well, but rest assured, we're not going on to our bigger and better things until everyone is feeling okay. And in this parsha, Miriam passes away. Numbers chapter 20, verse 1, the Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin on the first new moon. And the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The community was without water. And they complained. Rashi in the 11th century made the connection that is still very much with us today, based on earlier rabbinic commentary, but really crystallizing it in the Middle Ages, the notion of Miriam's well, that Miriam was a source of water for the Israelites in the desert. It's not an enormous stretch of the imagination when we think of Miriam's earlier associations, the Nile River with her little brother in his basket, and of course singing at the water's edge. We would think also that her period of separation from the community after her physical affliction would have likely been ultimately relieved by a kind of immersion in a living waters as well. And of course, Miriam's name, such an unusual name really, means bitter water. So there's always been a bittersweet quality, perhaps, of Miriam, but given the enduring love affair that we have with the name Miriam in various versions and spellings in English, it's clearly not turned away for its sense of bitterness. And it always contains within it a sense of hope that the bitter may yet turn to sweet. So this notion of Miriam's well that accompanied the Israelites for all the years they had been wandering thus and disappeared when she was gone is a poignant and powerful moment. Water is so essential to life. And Miriam, though we know nothing about her family life, whether she had children, we are all her children. And we, of course, now, it's just a recent tradition, memorialize her with the cup of water on our Seder tables that many choose to include. So here is this woman making just a few appearances in a story that really is a story of men, and yet leaving such a lasting impression, though it seems that she was not fully appreciated until she was gone. And that is sadly, my friends, as you know, too often the case, that we don't realize, men and women especially, sometimes until they are no longer with us. And so out of Rahmanis to everyone, I'll close in just a moment on this day when so many need healing in our little circle. But in honor of Miriam, I want to remember now someone, as I say, who we likely all did not know, but we knew people like her. We know people like her. Jackie Sundheim was 63 years old, an absolute pillar of sustenance and support in her synagogue community, the North Shore Congregation Israel in Glencoe, Illinois. Jackie was that person in her community, a staff member and lifelong congregant, who meticulously planned almost every life cycle event at her synagogue. She was the nourishing presence of ritual and detail and support for bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, weddings, baby namings, other celebrations, and funerals. Her fellow congregant, Jamie Grunbaum, said, "I learned so much from her. She was so smart, so genuine, so honest." Jackie Sundheim was murdered earlier this week at the 4th of July parade near Highland Park. Jackie was the one they would have turned to in their time of need to plan the levaya for anyone else in the community. And suddenly they realized someone else would need to step into the void. Who could provide the tenacity, the care, the professionalism, the steadfastness that she always gave to others? As it happens, Jamie Grunbaum is a funeral director for a nearby city, and she has stepped in to comfort the family, to make the funeral arrangements, to quite literally pick up the baton. Jamie said, "I just never thought I would have to provide this. But sometimes we are called to service when we least expect." Miriam was a constant presence, but we know so little about her. And yet when she died, the community was bereft of its nourishment. Sometimes that's the way it goes, that communities, families, countries don't appreciate what they have until the people that provide it are no longer there. It's human nature. But let us today think of the Miriams and the Jackies and the Jamies, all of those amazing women especially, who keep our communities going, our hospitals running, take care of our elders. And there are so many men who do extraordinary things, and I'm not minimizing that for a moment. But the way that Miriam is portrayed in our Torah reminds us that sometimes, too often, there are amazing women behind the scenes doing incredible things. Let us try, friends, to give gratitude for them while we have them. Thank them, tell them we love them. Let them know while we're here, while they're here, and while we're here, what they mean to us. In Miriam's memory, in Jackie's memory, may we continue our journey together in good health. Shabbat shalom.